When Donald Trump declared the beginning of his tariffs as Liberation Day in America, I had no idea that what he meant was liberation from trillions of dollars of value in the stock market, which is collapsing this morning because we have a moron for a president. But it is not just Donald Trump displaying his stupidity, as everyone else in his administration who is running to the press to scream about how great this is and try to defend the worst trade war in history. And the worst performance of those Trump stooges, of course, was Karoline Leavitt, Donald Trump's disastrous press secretary, who melted down when confronted over all the disastrous effects of Donald Trump's Liberation Day. And we are going to get into that meltdown. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video. And if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way and it really does mean a lot to me. Now, there are a couple of clips of Leavitt melting down, so I hope you stick around for all of them. But this one to start was pretty bad.
Boom.
On taxes, JP Morgan just came out with an analysis in response to this tariff announcement, saying that these tariffs will be the largest tax hike on Americans since 1968, a tax hike by $660 billion a year. What is JP Morgan missing? What are world markets getting wrong? What are, when you see stock futures down, what is everyone missing, including that local farmer in North Carolina?
Well, they're missing the massive revenue that these tariffs are going to bring into the United States. Trillions and trillions of dollars in investment, which leads to more jobs in American communities, higher wages, more money in the pockets of hardworking Americans.
In the most immediate, I mean, these farmers, as Tom Tillis says, farmers are one crop away from bankruptcy. That farmer doesn't have time to wait for tariffs to work their way into the system, the benefit of it to work its way into the system at all. This is going to mean higher prices for Americans. In the most immediate, that's why I asked the question, how much pain on a temporary basis is okay? What's the standard that the president is looking at in terms of how much pain Americans can feel on a temporary basis that he's okay with?
Again, the president is focused every single day on lowering the cost of living in this country while simultaneously implementing these very effective tariffs. Massive deregulation, an energy boom, and tax cuts are the economic formula that will mean more prosperity and the lower cost of living. And it's a proven formula. Look at President Trump's first term and the results. When he left office, inflation was 1.4%. He implemented many tariffs in his first term that did bring in billions of dollars in revenue. In fact, the previous administration knew they were so effective, that's why they left them in place. So again, the president is delivering on his promise to implement reciprocal tariffs while his administration is working hard every day to cut regulation, to reduce fraud, waste, and abuse in our federal government as well. And tax cuts are the next step of this economic agenda, which will lead to more investment, more money in our economy, more economic growth.
One quick question, because I've heard it suggested. Is there any chance that the president will pull back on implementing these tariffs before they go into effect this weekend?
The president made it clear yesterday, this is not a negotiation, this is a national emergency. He's always willing to pick up the phone to answer calls, but he laid out the case yesterday for why we are doing this, and these countries around the world have had 70 years to do the right thing by the American people, and they have chosen not to. They have ripped off American workers, they have taken our jobs overseas. The president is putting an end to that yesterday.
She really doesn't have a single answer or justification for why Donald Trump is continuing to go forward with has what already been a disaster before it even began. It's the thing that I've continued to say about Donald Trump's tariffs, that even if this was just a negotiating tactic, prices were raised by companies at the beginning of the year in anticipation of his tariffs. So we have already been feeling that short-term pain, as Donald Trump wants to describe it, and now it's hitting the stock market and will continue to hit the rest of the economy as things really start to settle in. And by settle in, I mean crumble. And when I say crumble, I'm not talking about Karoline Leavitt. Actually, I am, because she crumbled in this clip right here.
What is the White House reaction to, as we just had those numbers up, global markets tumbling this morning and futures down sharply?
To anyone on Wall Street this morning, I would say trust in President Trump. This is a president who is doubling down on his proven economic formula from his first term. We saw wages increase. We saw inflation come down. We had a Trump energy boom. We had the largest tax cuts in history. And that's exactly what the president intends to do following his historic announcement yesterday for reciprocal tariffs. It's the golden age rule for the golden age of America. And the United States of America is no longer going to be cheated by foreign nations around the world. And as the president declared yesterday, this is indeed a national emergency. We have a $1.2 trillion trade deficit and counting. We've had 90,000 factories close in the last couple of decades. Since 1997, Americans have been put out of 5 million manufacturing jobs.
Are you serious? We have to trust Trump? Donald Trump? Donald Trump is who we have to trust? The man is a pathological liar and has not made one correct economic prediction in the entirety of his presidency, except for the fact that he didn't want to be Herbert Hoover. I know that wasn't a prediction necessarily, but now he is. So his fears, those came true. But besides that, it's been all lies and destruction for Donald Trump. This man has crashed the economy now 2 times, 2 terms, 2 economic downturns. That is what the Donald Trump presidency is all about. And it's not just the chaos that he's causing at home, but it seems like he might be like breaking international law with these treaties, a NATO ordinance that Donald Trump has now violated that Karoline Leavitt was pressed on, and her response is exactly what you would expect.
The foreign minister of Norway in Brussels for NATO meetings said this morning that the tariffs could violate an article of the NATO treaty that orders members to promote economic stability and collaboration. If this is a breach of the NATO treaty, will the president reassess his approach?
No, the president is firm in his approach, and the president is ensuring economic stability here in the United States of America. Yesterday, he was joined in the Rose Garden by everyday Americans, middle-class workers. You heard from one of them who the president invited on stage by name because he knows this man and he knows what the impact of globalization has done to communities like Detroit, Michigan, where auto workers have been put out of jobs, where we've seen factories shut down. We have offshored critical supply chains in our country.
Oh, God. These are just the dumbest people in the world. And they're in the White House. And I don't know if you saw this report last night, but one of the many countries that Donald Trump has levied tariffs against is a small island in the Antarctic with no people there, but plenty of penguins. I also don't know if you saw, speaking on the international of it all, that Donald Trump decided he wasn't going to levy tariffs against Russia. He is going hard against penguins, but keeping things pretty soft with Putin. That is the Trump presidency. This is a complete clown show. How are we levying tariffs against penguins? How does that even make any sense? We still haven't gotten any information on how Donald Trump decided to come up with the wacky numbers of who he was tariffing the most and the least and in the middle ground. None of this makes sense. Donald Trump just likes the word. That's it. He just likes the word. He thinks it makes him feel strong, but really, it's just making our country weaker, which is what Senator Sheldon Whitehouse called out in a perfect takedown right here.
I take this issue deadly seriously. Not the president. Not the president. 0.2% of the fentanyl in America comes across the enormous Canadian border. If you did it like per mile of the American border, it would be unmeasurably small. And over this fake excuse that there's a huge fentanyl problem, 0.2%, they're going to dump enormous new expenses on American families. People have called this a sales tax, and it kind of is, because what it does is it raises prices. It raises prices because the money that the federal government takes in has to be recovered. And it gets recovered from families, from people who are paying higher prices for imported goods or higher prices for the domestic freeloaders who are going to raise their prices to match the imported goods just the way the fossil fuel industry raised their prices to match the foreign prices of fuel after the Ukraine invasion, and so gorged themselves that they made the biggest profits off the American people in the history of corporations. It was the biggest gouge ever by the scoundrels of the fossil fuel industry, and now we're opening the door for this to happen across all industries. American families are going to be hurt, and they're going to be hurt hard, and it just puts revenues on the books that the Republicans can then use to go and do what they really want to do here, which is to make sure that all their billionaire cronies, everybody who's surrounding Trump, all the pals in the cabinet, all the ones who write the big checks to the super PACs and who fund Republican politicians, that they don't have to pay taxes anymore. It's Leona Helmsley Day here in the Senate. Taxes are just for the little people. This is a disgrace, and I hope there'll be a few voices on the Republican side to recognize that considering the Canadian border to be an emergency is preposterous. I yield the floor.
This has been an absolute disaster, and it's barely even begun. I can only see the economic destruction to continue from this point, and it's the reason why I think Donald Trump actually decided to move his tariff announcement, his Liberation Day, from April 1st, a Tuesday, to April 2nd. He said he didn't want to do it on a day that was going to be April Fool's, right? But here's the real reason. We had an election on those 2 days. Donald Trump knew that if he announced his tariffs and the economy crashed as badly as it did yesterday on that day, it would have looked even worse for him. And he got blown out in Wisconsin. Those Florida races were incredibly tight. That is what Donald Trump is worried about. He's also worried about 2026 as well. And he has a new reason to be worried because we just saw a new and incredible announcement. A Democrat in New Hampshire, Chris Pappas, is running for Senate. This is an incredibly important race. We saw it be close last time around in 2022, and we have to make sure that in 2026, we are not only holding our Democratic seats, but we are expanding the map. And that starts with making sure we have New Hampshire locked down. Chris Pappas is a Democrat running in this race, and he would be the first openly gay man to serve in the United States Senate. But it's not just that. He is an incredible candidate who I highly recommend you check out. And if you enjoy him and you think he's going to be doing incredible work, which he will be in the United States Senate, and you are called, you feel moved to support his campaign, it really goes a long way. So I'm going to drop a link in the pinned comment of this video, in the description of this video, for you to support his campaign. We need to make sure that we are holding down our Democratic seats. We got to be expanding the map. People are pissed, rightfully so. Let's jump on this. Let's fight back. It's what we're going to be talking about every single day on this show. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button. You can leave a like on this video. And if you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.